Okay.
They're all slightly improving over the last one since 2020, I think, slightly. So I'll take it.
Yeah.
Baby steps.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're missing Bob.
How's it
How are you,
going?
Andy?
Charlie's joining. So, thank you. I just realized since we did the switch, the change of plans, this packet that I sent out doesn't have the. Yeah, I think. Well, we have a quorum. We could start if commission would like to.
Okay. I'd like to call to order.
One moment, let me make sure we're live. Sorry.
Okay, sure.
Are we live then? Oh. All right, we're good to go.
Okay, I'd like to call to order the January 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Andy, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Chair Costello.
Here.
Commissioner Tantillo, not present right now. Commissioner Hall.
Here.
Commissioner Bruno.
Here.
Commissioner Svestka.
Here.
Commissioner Barnes.
Here.
And Commissioner Scovich.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Okay. Shall we all join together and say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Indivisible,
with liberty.
liberty and justice for all.
Okay. And now we're going to take a motion to open the public hearing. Is that correct, Andy?
Yes.
Okay. Would anybody like to make a motion to open the public hearing?
Sure, I'll move to open the public hearing.
Second?
Second,
Who was that, Greg?
Justin.
Justin, okay, thanks. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we're opening the public hearing now for public comments. I don't suppose we have too many guests. Yes, Tom.
Is this for any comments or is it specific to the sheds and fences?
It's any comments.
That's, our agenda says any comments or public comments, so.
Can I jump in? I have a couple.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Looking at one of the proposed floor plan of the proposed development, I had a couple of questions, and I'm guessing that the planning and zoning group will get to these. I just wanted to ask. As two questions. One is about the drive-through window. As it looks now, from what I can tell from the floor plan, looks like people would have to reach over the sidewalk. So is there the concept of building out a box or something so cars in through, right, they could hand it? That's one question. And then the second question, on that same proposed floor plan, you can see the bold property line, and wondering what the contingency plans are if the county needs to push Wolf Road a little further west, if it's 5 feet or 15 feet, which I believe those are the two options that they have looked at. Just wanted to see if there's contingency plans. And I believe I just asked my questions and then maybe they can get answered later. That's right.
Okay, we'll come back, circle back around to those. Yeah, Charlie, you have something?
Yeah, are we supposed to be live on channel 6? Because I don't see it going on now, so I just mentioned that to you.
Thank you, Charlie. Let me make sure. When did I share live on channel 6? We're live on YouTube, I know that. But we'll get it going on channel 6 if we're not, so I
Okay.
think we're good to go.
Okay, we will definitely come back to those points regarding the PUD.
Oh, Trigger Cell, I have one public comment that was emailed in as well.
Okay,
This is from resident Dale Homequest. She says, please stay with the original development plan for the triangle. Don't allow the requested PUD on the dome site. It will cause traffic congestion at the intersection. The footprint of the building and lot is too small to support the structure and necessary parking.
okay,
That's all we got.
all right. Very good. Any other public comments at this time? Now we're going to go out of the public hearing. Andy, correct? If we have no further comments at this.
I did have one more, sorry.
Sure.
I wanted to say, I thought the whole proposal was great. And I wanted to thank the group for submitting the proposal for the corner. I think it would be wonderful to have something there. So thank you very much. I should have said that before asking my question, so I apologize.
Okay. And of course, we're going to come back around to that whole topic.
And
Okay.
Chair Gasol, we'll close it after after we talk about the plan unit development.
Oh, okay, so we leave it open at that. Okay, so right now we'll jump forward to old business, and we want to continue the special use hearings into February for 6557 Howard Avenue. Does anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Justin, and anybody second?
I'll second.
And now, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. The special use hearing will be continued to the February meeting. Okay, now our new business. We're going to talk about the proposed PUD application for the triangle. And it looks like our petitioner is present.
Yeah, and I'll, if you don't mind, I'll give a little background.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Nicholas Ravaliotis and his associates are applying for a proposed plan unit development at 6921 Joliet Road. This is the location of the Old Dome restaurant, which was owned by Mr. Ravaliotis. It's at the intersection of Wolf Road and Joliet Road. And Mr. Ravaliotis has been a resident of Indian Head Park for some time. They're interested in building a small retail building at the vacant property, maybe with a drive-through. And the idea right now would be that it would house 2 to 3 retail businesses. As of right now, they've filled out their application. You have it in front of you. The only thing that's going to come later is a traffic study. And I'll be working with Kirk. Kirk is on the call right now. He's the architect for Mr. Ravaliotis and his associates, and we'll work with Kirk to get him the information he needs to do the traffic study, depending on what happens with Wolf Road. And I'm sure we'll talk about that tonight because as we've talked about a little bit in the past, and maybe you've heard, Cook County is looking to expand Wolf Road in the next few years. And part of that would be potentially adding sidewalks and bike lanes on it. And if that happens, they may need to acquire more land. And part of that would be land from this property. And so one of the kind of contingencies or considerations is what's going to happen if they lose 15 or 10 or 20 feet from when Cook County acquires it, which right now we think Cook County probably will acquire something. We don't know specifics yet. So we're still waiting on the traffic study, and tonight there's no real vote on anything. It's just kind of to introduce the commissioners to the proposal and to have the commissioners ask any questions that they're interested in so that Kirk can either answer them or do the research he's going to do. So with that, I'll hand it over to Kirk, let him kind of talk about the project, and then we can just open it up to questions and go from there.
Great idea. Okay. Kirk, would you like to?
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Andy. First, I do want to say I appreciate the compliment, and any questions that you do have, we don't take it as criticism. We want to fine tune the design to get it just right. So if I may begin, good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning and Zoning Committee. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for allowing me to appear before you tonight, albeit virtually. I would also like to thank Mr. John DeRocher and Mr. Andy Farini once again for all their assistance in helping us get to this point. My name is Kirk Alexakos, Principal Architect of Epic ACD. I am appearing before you tonight on behalf of the property owners, Mr. Nick Reveliotis, Mr. Dimitris Katris, and Mr. Tassos Katris. Mr. Reveliotis and Mr. Katris are Indian Head Park residents. They send their appreciation and apologize they could not attend as it is difficult for them to navigate the Zoom system. They hope that any future meetings can be in person where they would gladly be in attendance. For tonight, I would happily answer any questions you may have for them to the best of my knowledge based on numerous conversations we have had recently. Their families have owned parcel 1 of the Triangle area redevelopment at the southwest corner of Joliet and Wolf Road for almost 10 years. The existing vacant property previously had on it the Old Dome family restaurant. The owners have shown interest in and are intending to develop the vacant 15,000 square foot property that has been sitting vacant since 2016. As you can see in the packet we provided you, they are proposing a new 3,200 square foot commercial retail center with 3 tenant spaces of approximately 1,000 square feet each. The proposed building has been laid out on the site to take advantage of and make the best of the acute corner property. It has been designed with a potential drive-through lane, which can entice more major anchor tenants to the location. They've had advanced discussions with potential tenants in the restaurant and hospitality industry who have shown interest in becoming tenants in this highly visible area of Indian Head Park. There have also been discussions on what type of tenants they will be avoiding, Specifically mentioned were nail and hair salons. The design consists of 13 total parking spaces in the newly landscaped parking lot that takes vehicular access into account, as well as minimizing pedestrian and vehicular conflict by placing the spaces closer to the building rather than forcing pedestrians to cross multiple driving lanes in order to access the units. There is also an alternate option shown on page 6 of the packet we provided you, showing a scheme with no access to and from Wolf Road. As we understand it, as we mentioned, the county is planning to acquire some of the property to the east, restricting vehicular access to that site. Although access to Wolf Road is preferred, in this scheme preparing for that scenario, they can gain additional parking, bringing the total up to 15 total spaces. The proposed building has been designed with a brick masonry veneer and a fiber cement cladding system above of alternating warm and modern colors, along with an aluminum awning system over the windows and doors to allow for protection from the weather, as well as more modern and current design elements. The colors chosen have been selected to provide the building with a cohesive color scheme and act as an attractive backdrop to retail tenant signage. The proposed design would modernize the visible facade and update the streetscape of the building to be in line with newer and aesthetically contemporary designs found in recently built retail centers. The varying parapet heights and overall building curb appeal have been designed to allow for interplay of differing volumes, separating the tenant units visually in a way that they can each have different levels of exposure and attention from both Joliet and Wolf Roads. If a tenant requires more than one unit, visually the facades cohesively tie in together with materials and colors unifying the tenant spaces. We hope you agree that the proposed development is respectful to the visual feel of Indian Head Park, while also lifting the bar on the appearance of retail developments in and around the area. We feel as if we've found a balance between providing respectful facade design that would draw in tenants and customers alike, while satisfying the modern touches the retail center needs as a prominent piece of the Indian Head Park community. We appreciate your time and consideration of our submittal. Thank you so much.
What type of tenants do you have in mind, or give us some idea of how you envision?
Well, the owners are they're a restaurant family, so their intention would be some sort of restaurant, whether it be a fast food or a major tenant. That was their intention.
Okay. For all 3 spaces, or something besides food?
Right now, the discussion is very preliminary. So whether somebody wants 1 or 2 or all the spaces, they're up for the most, the best option for them.
Okay. Let's have a
So
question.
this is a speculative development?
Yes.
And your client, where else have they had success in this realm that we might be able to use as a baseline?
Yeah, I can get you addresses if you'd like. I know they had mentioned Hanover Park. There's a couple in the city, southwest suburbs. I can get you more detailed information if you'd like.
Are we talking about national chains or other type restaurants?
It's their own. The developments that I'm speaking of are their own restaurants. I don't think their intention is to put their own restaurant in there. I think it's to bring in other restaurants.
Okay. Maybe we can.
Hi, this is.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to jump in.
Yep.
Hi, this is Justin, and I was just wondering. You said that they've owned that property for the last 10 years. Has there been any requests, proposals to put something there prior to this proposal?
I would not be aware of that. I have not been involved for 10 years. I've only been brought on recently.
The only reason I'm asking is just because why now, and why didn't they try to put something there before or earlier? Because it's been sitting empty and vacant for that long, and I was just curious. But we can ask them when we have the meeting in person, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And maybe we could swing back to if the county takes a fair chunk of this land, I don't see that the contingency plan dealt with that. All I see is a difference in that kind of drive-through lane
Sure.
from 22 to 14, 22.3 to 14.8 on the strip that is parallel to Wolf Road. Am I
Right.
missing something?
Well, the intention of the drawing was just to show what would happen to the portions of inside of our property lines. What would be happening outside of that property line, as you noted earlier, the thick line is our property line, and I'm measuring that to be around a little over 25 feet. So any of the numbers that we discussed, whether it be 5, 10, 15, would be taken out of the portion outside of our property. There would obviously be no access, so all the vehicular circulation has to be restrained into what we've shown here.
All right, well, maybe Andy can clarify. I mean, my understanding would be when I'm looking at the survey, it shows that there's the potential for a portion of the private property to be acquired. So whether that would be done by, cooperatively with the owner or not. I mean, the owner would be compensated, but what you'll end up with a smaller piece of property.
It is a
Right?
yeah, it is a possibility that the county would through eminent domain be able to purchase parts of the private property. So I think that's something that to consider and plan for as well, depending on how much they take from it. Like Kirk is right in that, there's from Wolf Road to their certain amount, but if they need to go beyond that, they will, and more than likely they probably will purchase some of it. Of course, they'll be compensated, but that is something to consider as well. And I think that might be something for our next meeting to kind of come up with a contingency plan for. And Kirk, we can talk at it more at length as well.
The few sketches that I have seen, although they were just marked up drawings, didn't go within our property line. So our hope is that they wouldn't. But I feel that it wouldn't be a redesign, even if they were to shave off X amount of feet. It wouldn't be a complete redesign, as we're sort of limited in how the flow of the property is coming in from Joliet. If an emergency vehicle or even a drive-through wants to go around, you really have no other option than to go in that direction. And what would change is probably the size of the building. We can't really alter or minimize driving lanes or parking dimensions. So the building would have to be sacrificed.
So what's the timing of this, Andy? Could this be built before the county comes in and says, oh, we're going to take 30 feet?
The timing is tricky. So we will have more concrete information from the county probably in April is what we've been told right now.
Okay.
We will have much more, Mayor Henshaw is nodding, he's part of the meeting too. We will have the actual numbers in a few months. Right now, we've been told that it's probably going to happen, but not specifics of how much. That right now the engineers are still conducting the study for Wolf Road. So once the study is done and the county has reviewed it, then they will let us know, and then eventually the county will have a public hearing for residents to come voice their opinion on the project as a whole. But that's going to be this spring. So early spring, we should have actual numbers on just how much they're going to need or not need. So, Mayor Henshaw, you have something to add?
Yeah, just to add on to that, if that's okay, Noreen.
Of course.
As Andy said, the county does plan a public hearing. The time frame is April, at least for now. But that would be the first pass. And so that would be the end of phase 1. Then they would have a phase 2, which takes the feedback from the municipalities involved, like Indiana Head Park, Burr Ridge, the schools, the residents, businesses, everybody along that corridor. And then they would come back in approximately another year for a more defined plan. So the first plan that's due in April would have alternatives. So Andy, I'm not sure that we would know exactly how much in April. And I do think a year from April, so 2023, we would have a much better idea. I'm not sure that it would be concrete, but it is a county project, county road. But at least that's the schedule that I have heard.
I see. And it looks like the developer's estimation would be you'd start construction in late spring, early summer. And that would be okay for, if we get that report from the county, would they say we'll take no more than this? Or would possibly a year later they come back and say, no, we still need more land?
I have not been in the situation before as mayor or working with the county. So again, what I believe they will be proposing in April is the alternatives. And whether it's called a 3-lane or 5-lane, you know, I think we're kind of familiar with that with Plainfield Road. And then there would be all the discussion, feedback they would be gathering. So I really don't think they'd have an answer. And I have no idea if, you know, the village approves it as is and we go through the motions. I can't believe the county would say yes until they know. So I don't know if it would be approved by the county until next year. But again, I have not been in this situation, so I don't know.
I see.
Yeah, so the plan right now for staff is, after this meeting, before the next meeting, we'll be working with Kirk on the traffic study, and then also trying to come up with a plan for dealing with the county and approval of this, if this is approved, just to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Right now, a lot of it is kind of up in the air. That's why there's no recommendations or voting tonight. It's just a kind of an introductory.
If I may add,
Yeah.
Having discussions with the owners, their intention is not to, if I may rephrase that, they want to take the worst case scenario with the intention that the county will take something. They do not want to build the building and then the county starts taking their land, and then, for example, the traffic flow around the building is an impossibility, or it gets too close to the building. So it's a tight rope walk that we're doing right now, trying to make the design as flexible as possible, so that if anyone comes in, starts changing, and through experience, if I could just throw in my 2 cents about the county, they're full of surprises. Having dealt with them before, they'll say one thing for a year and then all of a sudden change it. So we want to be cautious of that, and just as I mentioned, design something as flexible as possible so that if they do take something, it isn't detrimental to the site and the building.
Yeah. Well, it is beautiful. I think
Appreciate that.
The drawing so far.
So you mentioned that should the property end up being a little bit smaller because of this potential taking, the solution would be to go ahead and build something, but build something smaller. You said this is a 3,000 square foot.
Their intention,
the potential for 3 tenants. They might, if they had to go smaller, would they proceed with the project and just presume that maybe they could only have 2 tenants, something like that?
the goal is from the beginning was their wish list was 3 standard tenant spaces at about 1,000 square feet each. And that's what we designed for. You notice the chamfered edges to allow for the traffic around the building. These are just things that we need. If it were to get smaller, I think taking off 1,000 might be a little much. let's just say they now become 3,800 or 3,900 square foot units. I think that would be acceptable. If they were to be 500, I don't know any restaurant or any business for that matter. I keep saying restaurants, but any business for that matter, other than a cell phone store, which I don't know if that's what we want. No offense, cell phone stores. So we have to be careful with how small it gets. Otherwise, we would be looking at, for lease signs for a really long time.
Well, I do think that the alternate that assumes that this property is accessed only from Joliet Road has advantages, but I mean, both for just traffic safety purposes, but also just as part of the original PUD vision was that this property would be, it would still be a separate property, but it would be developed in a way that worked more in conjunction with what is next to it. And so I think my fundamental question here is, you've gone to great lengths to try to figure out a way for the parking and the circulation and everything on this particular parcel to work completely independently of what is right next door to it, which is another large parking lot. So I think my question maybe goes back to Andy and the trustees, which is, what is the feasibility of sitting down with the owners of the primary shopping center and coming up with a more effective and maybe even more attractive, ultimately, solution where there could be a cross easement of some kind so that emergency vehicles and shoppers and even people maybe using, getting into or out of the drive-through lane could be using the existing curb cuts, for the primary shopping center as well, because the original PUD concept was that it would be part of a more kind of cohesive whole, and the traffic issues would be addressed, by having a lot of the circulation happening internally. Someone could pull into the shopping center, the Wolf's Head shopping center, but they could also circulate through and go park at the corner, or do the drive-through. And there'd be a lot more flexibility in terms of being able to fit, a 3,000 square foot building onto this site and deal with the traffic enclosure and things like that, if there was a possibility of looking at how the adjacent parking area is arranged and, coming up with a solution that works better for everybody.
I think that definitely would be ideal. I don't know too much about it. I wasn't involved in it. This was a couple of years ago. I know at one time, I think it was looked into and it didn't really go anywhere with the plaza owner. Kirk, I don't know if you have talked to them at all. I certainly I think it's worth going back to it and trying to do it again.
Andy, if I may add a little information to that. So according to what Mr. Nick told me, when we were initially deciding where our entry driveways would be, we wanted to get away from the intersection, obviously. We even proposed an idea where we removed all of our driveways, and he did have, and I want to be careful saying this, he did have a very brief discussion with the owners, and we all have to understand that the other owners are business people and they do not want encroachments onto their property without being compensated, and the compensation was something that wasn't fair, and hence the very brief discussion.
I will say, I think it probably is, especially now with this coming up, I think it is worth it for the village to try to get involved again with you. But yeah, that's similar to what you're saying. That's what I've heard in the past too. So
it would certainly be advantageous at the end of the day to both parties. Both properties would be more appealing to shoppers, more, there could actually, I'm just looking at it. Yeah, the layout of the parking that they have is very inefficient, and it could be improved. you know, there could be more effective areas where landscaping was provided, you know, if both worked together to try to figure out a way to make sure that they had all the parking they needed, you had all the parking you needed, the access to the whole area was done in a way that was safe. Even if it was just a little bit of a swap, you know, like one row of
Sure.
parking of theirs for one row of parking of yours or something, but this sort of sawtooth pattern, you know, where you have 5 parking spaces that someone is coming into from this direction, and then right next to it, there are 6 parking spaces that someone's pulling into from the other direction. I mean, it's just,
Right.
it's not even a safe situation, much less, you know, the ability to provide a strip of landscaping or something to make it look nice. It would be confusing, and people would be pulling into the drive-through lane because they didn't know where to stop. I mean, it would just, I see so many issues with
Absolutely.
this property line and all the conflicts that are happening along it. There's got to be a way to sit down and figure out how many parking spaces they need and how many you need, and, you know, and come up with a way that the people that are coming in here to be shoppers can figure it out.
Intuitively.
You know, and navigate it
Right.
safely and not be running into each other all the time. And maybe still be able to have a drive-through, even if, you know, you're going to lose 5 or 10 feet of your property, because right now that doesn't work if 5 or 10 feet is gone. But only because you're hemmed in on the other side. So, you know, this proposal for the Wolf Road redesign may impact them as well, right? Andy, and that hasn't really been discussed either, is sort of what are the implications for their parking on that side of their building, you know, and how it might be impacted too. So there's bigger questions that ought to be worked out all sort of cooperatively together, if that can be done. I would hope that could be done, but not asking anybody to, you know, take a hit financially or give something up, but just figure out a way for it all to work a little better at the end of the day than it would if, you know, if your new investment happens at the corner and everything on the existing property stays the same. There's going to be some real conflicts in terms of how cars are moving around that's going to cause a lot of confusion and even some safety issues. I think people trying to cut into the drive-through lane, you know, there's going to be some problems I see.
I do agree with you that some of the development of the design has to occur at the perimeter of our property, because you are correct. It will not be intuitive. And I don't know if the solution is do not enter signs in certain places. As a designer, I would have appreciated sitting down with the other parties and coming up with one cohesive plan. But unfortunately, when one party builds at different times than another, I don't know if an outlot is the best way to say it, but you have to consider yourself like an outlot, and that's where we are. And it's almost like we have to fend for ourselves at this point if we can't work together with them. We would love to, but it has to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate that your building is designed to be attractive from all vantage points. You're not even necessarily just building something where everyone in their shopping center is going to be looking at the back end of
there's no front and back
unattractive
here
building, you know. So
right.
I would hope they appreciate that, but it is, you know, there's got to be a way for it to work better for everybody if they were willing to, you know, sit down at the table and
Sure.
kind of talk over some of the potential alternatives, especially with the county in the mix, you know, that might come along and take a little slice off of everybody on the east side. Because then you might be able to proceed, you know, with a little more confidence of sort of knowing what the solution was going to be.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what the county does.
There's a lot of moving parts, aren't there?
Yeah.
This is not an easy one.
Yeah. It's, we'll just have to keep reassessing every time we get new information, I suppose. But I agree with that. The other tenants have a lot to gain by having another tenant, a successful tenant with with curb appeal to the site, so. Yeah, so what do you think, Andy? You think village can get involved in that, huh? In that discussion?
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, like I said, we'll be working with Kirk over the next month and trying to keep moving this thing forward. But I think, yeah, if no one else has any questions or anything for Kirk, I think we could let it go.
Mayor mentioned a drive-through window. There would be adequate space to have a window there for the drive-through, something jutting out a little bit to make it convenient for the drivers. Do you know what I'm saying?
So I would like to take the other questions as well, but addressing that. So that sidewalk that he mentioned, that's only about 3 feet. And that is pretty standard when it comes to two outreaching hands in a drive-through situation. So it's not too large. We also want to make that, again, it's that flexibility and the circulation around the building for both vehicles and pedestrians. So we definitely do need to address that some more. Right now, this is just in a preliminary phase. This is where we feel it's the best location, whether how much it juts out, what happens to that 3 feet, whether it becomes smaller, bigger, that's to be redesigned at this point, if that needs changing.
Got it.
I saw there were 2 other.
Yeah, Charlie?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I believe Eileen Donnersberger is working with the present owner of the center there with the idea of improving the facades and looking for money that would enhance the appeal of the center in doing that. And I wonder if that might be something that we can blend into this overall conversation about equitable access to all the units. So I just wanted to make mention of that. Don't have an answer, but that might be something that Andy, you'll want to follow up with Eileen to see where she might be in her discussions.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. Greg, did you have something? Yes,
do.
Greg.
Hey, Kurt, good looking package. I look forward to seeing it evolve. A couple questions. The access point you have off of Joliet Road, are you taking advantage of the existing access point?
Correct.
And that is saved for whatever improvements to refurbish it. That is, with the current access point is dimensioned adequately such that you can preserve it in its entirety, correct?
To our understanding, we will need to address site triangles, et cetera, right in, right out. So it will definitely deserve attention.
And okay, terrific. And your traffic guy will educate all of us and get us all smart on that. There's an access point onto the dome site off of Wolf Road.
Correct.
And I also see a version where whether it is implemented or not, I see an access off of Wolf Road. Would that be a new access point, or would you also be taking advantage of the existing access point off of Wolf Road?
Okay, so the existing access point to Wolf Road, if you take a look at the plat of survey, Google Maps also has it as well. It is actually fairly close to the intersection. So our first discussion was that most likely it will not stay there. It'll have to move away from the intersection. The traffic study people all agreed with that. So I have the number here somewhere that we shifted it over 50 feet. So we moved it away from the intersection 50 feet.
Gotcha.
Just to give ourselves some space. But through our discussions, through our thoughts of what the county is intending, that might not be there.
Terrific.
So even that option would be eliminated.
It's a non-issue based on some of the feedback that Tom and Andy have shared with us, but just still wanted to know. And then finally, you're doing this every day. Can you remind me, I see we have one handicap stall. Is the calculation for number of handicap stalls based on the square footage, or is it driven by the number of potential suites?
It is a calculation of square footage and the occupancy type. So
Okay.
I'm almost taking, again, this is flexible, but I need to take the worst case scenario. So I'm expecting that 3 high volume tenants need it. And for example, if it were a restaurant, it would be based on how many occupants that restaurant has. Then you take that calculation and give yourself X amount of parking spaces. So for office use, for example, this is way too many parking spaces. But if you wanted a more higher volume, this meets it.
Oh, I was again, this is your business. I was actually arriving at the fact that expressing concern about the limited number of parking stalls, but again, this is your business. You guys know what you're doing. So if you say 13 with a single handicap stall will be adequate for your potentially 3 tenants, then, you know, I'll take your word for it. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't eroding the 13 stalls with the potential of more handicap stalls.
The handicap stalls typically are one per X, and that, I'm sorry?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I maybe heard my echo. It's 1 per X. So if that's 20, so since we have 13, 1 is required. If you were to have 21, you would need 2.
Gotcha. Okay, terrific. That's all I've got, Noreen.
But in terms,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm
Corey.
sorry, I just wanted to add, in terms of accessibility, we're very sensitive to that. So if we definitely need 2, even though we're only required 1, we need to do what we need to do.
Yeah.
To make it right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think this commission would impose anything over and above what your normal building codes would require of you. But if your user wanted to increase, by all means.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, it depends on the tenant. If it's something that you would need more accessible spaces, it only makes sense to add them.
So we look forward to seeing you again from time to time.
Likewise.
Get things more, develop more. It's a very exciting project. Any other comments or questions, or can we let Kurt go for now?
Noreen, who in the public hearing, who wrote the email in opposition, I believe?
Dale Holmquist. She lives in Indianwood, south end of Indian Head Park.
Terrific, thank you.
She's,
what was her concern about it being coordinated with the rest of not necessarily the idea of it being redeveloped, but just how it was going to be?
I'll bring it up. Let me see it.
I think one of the things she said was it wasn't in keeping with our original plan, but my recollection is that it does. We talked about a drive-through there.
Yes.
Yeah, it was plan and traffic.
And traffic. Well, we won't ignore the traffic issue.
If I recall, it was the.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Kurt.
I apologize. If I recall, it was. It should be more like the original, and although the first option isn't like the original because we are using 2 driveways, the alternate you could see has similarities.
Yeah, and it's the plan.
The shape.
The concept just assumed, like I had mentioned, that, you know, all of the parking for that whole area along Joliet Road would be more coordinated and easier to use. And so this would be like just sort of the last section of a more kind of logically laid out parking area.
Right.
And it would accommodate a drive-through, and it would assume that you would only come in and out off of Joliet Road, off of Joliet. it envisioned that it would sort of be part of a more unified whole so that there wasn't, some of these confusing traffic situations and parking situations created by it.
Yeah, hopefully those meetings with the landlord over there will be productive, where he can see the benefit of where we're all working together on this.
Yeah, the feature of the one that doesn't have the curb cut that allows for an little outdoor dining area, for example, something like that. I mean, those are the kind of things we were envisioning when we did the PUD, was, attractive businesses that could have a little seating area outside and, the flower pots and all of that. So, I mean, that seems to be more in keeping with that vision, to being able to have it just be an uninterrupted curb line along Wolf and have something happening at the side of the building there, would be nice. The only question I had actually for the renderings, I know they're very preliminary, but I'm trying to recall what our standards were. All of the HVAC equipment would be up on the roof of this one-story building, right? So would there be some sort of enclosure up at that roof level?
Yeah. The intention is not to even have an enclosure visible. I would like the parapets to do that job, so that you don't even see anything above the parapet line. And if that means that the parapet might get a tiny bit higher, I wouldn't add 4 feet, but if we had to add a foot or two, just to be able to conceal those, yeah.
Okay, so the design intent is to be shielding from view any of the messier things that would be.
Yes,
needed.
absolutely.
Okay.
There's no reason to make a pretty building with an ugly hat.
Right.
Great, that's great. Well, this is exciting. Thank you for your time tonight, and look forward to more meetings.
I thank you all for your time, and I hope everyone has a great evening.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you again.
Thanks for your time, Kurt.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We can move on to our next discussion. Andy, unless you have anything to throw in here at the moment.
No, I'll start us off, I guess. So,
okay.
So the main purpose of the next point is, and this is something that has come up throughout the whole process, dealing with the sheds and the fences in the Bartlett homes, and then eventually elsewhere as well, is this idea of hardship and what criteria or what parameters a certain home may have or may not have that would justify a special use for a hardship. And so I included in the packet the different criteria for special uses to be granted for sheds and fences. A lot of the criteria was originally recommended by this commission, and the board adopted it in the shed ordinance they passed. That's everything from that it needs to be 12 by 12 by 10 or smaller. It has to be no electricity, no animals living there, stuff like that. But one of the big ones, and the one that is the most open to interpretation, is that, to quote it, is the special uses are not to be granted for the mere convenience of the property owner. Consideration must be given to the type of house, full, partial, slab, basement, construction, etc., garage size, stuff like that. And so that's really kind of the hardship criteria. And so in addition to the other requirements like size, that is a criteria that the commission and ultimately the board has to feel that the petitioner meets. And then it's always kind of been a little bit of a debate of what is a hardship. How small is a house that it becomes a hardship to store this? How small is a garage that it becomes a hardship to store this? Stuff like that. How many floors do you have a basement, etc. And so the board started the discussion at their meeting last month, and then gave it to staff to look at some more, to get legal opinion from our village attorney, etc. And so staff has come up with some recommendations. But also the board is looking to get some recommendations from the Planning and Zoning Commission about what you feel should be the parameters for a home and for a petitioner, and whether or not they have a hardship and they need and they should be granted a special use permit for a shed. The recommendation that village staff has come up with is that we think that the key in general, the key to it is not necessarily how many floors does a house have, does it have a basement or not, but really the size of the garage. And the way we get to that is that the kinds of items that you're going to be storing in a shed are the kinds of items you would store in a garage: lawn mowers, snow blowers, lawn maintenance equipment, stuff that, it's been mentioned before, you're not going to be rolling it down into your basement or bringing it upstairs. It's going to be either in the garage or in a shed or something like that. So village staff kind of did some research on what are the typical sizes of a garage, what are the typical sizes of a two-car garage, which most people in the village have, and then also what sizes of a garage are there that you have enough space in the garage to store stuff other than just the vehicles, the primary purpose of the garage, to house the vehicles. And so we kind of came to the conclusion that, and our recommendation is that 400 square feet or 20 by 20, that or lower, you probably do not have enough space in your garage to store all of the necessary items that you might need for lawn maintenance or yard work, etc. And so that is where we're coming from. That is our recommendation. But I know for a fact that not even everyone on the board agrees. I'm sure some on the commission feel differently as well. So that's why we wanted to have a discussion about it tonight and either come up with some recommendations or some points for the board to consider at their meetings going forward.
And who met to discuss? Who came up with that? Did you have a little committee that discussed this, Andy, or who
it was mostly John and myself.
Got it. Okay.
We just kind of we talked about it, and we considered what the board said, what the commission has talked about in the past, and then kind of just brainstormed ourselves about, what kind of items are they going to be storing, what kind of, where are they realistically going to put this stuff if not in the garage or a shed. And then that's kind of where we came from. It was primarily John and myself. A little bit, we talked with the village attorney about kind of other general standards for hardship, and he told us that, and this is just how it is in zoning, a lot of things are open to interpretation. And so that's why we're kind of looking for ultimately the village board to give direction to the commission, to staff on hardship going forward. And that's why we're coming here tonight also just to get input from the commission, so we can all kind of collaborate and work as a team to come up with some standards, some policy going forward on hardship and granting sheds.
So just out of curiosity, using these parameters you provided, let's say someone has a 20 by 20 garage as a 2-car and then a 12 by 12 as their 3-car garage. Would that still fit in these parameters of hardship if we're using 20 by 20 as the small side of a standard 2-car? So like if someone comes to us and says, I've got a 3-car garage, 3 doors or a 2-door and a single door, and they say my 2-door is a 20 by 20, would that put them in the parameter for having a hardship, or would we say
if they had a
garage?
If they had a garage that could fit 3 cars, then no, it would have to be the 20 by 20 total.
So a 2-car garage and storage for 2 vehicles is kind of the limit of the discussion.
Yes.
With regards to garage size.
And I included in the package some renderings of kind of two different garages, a 20 by 20 where basically you only have room for the cars, And then also a 24 by 24, which in that case, you have room for the other stuff. And so that's kind of how we got to 20 by 20. That was our thinking.
Mhm.
So we currently aren't asking petitioners to provide us with that level of detail of information about like what size their
No.
No,
their
we're not.
unheated
That's a
garage
nice-
space that they use for storage is, but we would potentially add that as an item that we would want them to document for us.
Yes, if say the board takes the recommendation and decides 20 by 20 in general is going to be the standard, then going forward, anyone who applies, we would get a measurement of the garage and see if it falls within that. And if say it's 405 feet, it doesn't mean we automatically say no. It is flexible, but as it's kind of a general rule, we think 20 by 20 is probably a good standard.
I imagine that's case, as everything is, it's case by case too. Like what does this family have to store that, I mean, families that don't do their own lawn care is a different story than families that do their own lawn care, I presume, and snow blower and.
Exactly, it's not a hardship if you don't have the equipment if you don't need to store the equipment. Whereas if you have to store the equipment, it can be quite difficult if you don't have room in the garage. So.
Yeah, Rita.
Yeah, my question is, would this be included in the language of the ordinance, these criteria? So people have notice of what is required before they come before the board or the zoning committee?
It could be if the board wanted to, or it could just kind of be an unofficial direction from the board that generally we want it to be 20 by 20. And we would on the staff side, we would let everyone know in general, you want it to be less than this, but it's kind of the choice of the board if you want to put it into codify it, or if you want to leave it as just direction to the administration to inform residents when they come through the process.
Yeah, I just would like some way that they know that, when they come in that, well, here's the standard. And right off the bat, you don't meet the standard. So, then for them to have to apply and pay fees, I think there should be some notice to people as to what's going to be required.
Absolutely.
It's just my 2 cents. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Andy, if I could jump in here too. I feel like just picking a random square footage based on renderings doesn't reflect how people use their property. And we don't know the square footage of their yards. We don't know if they have a lawn service, they don't have a lawn service. And I'm not entirely sure that it's really any of our business. The other thing too is we don't know what kind of cars they have. There's just a lot of hoops that somebody may have to jump through, and there's a lot of variables where I would be really hesitant to consider codification of anything. I don't think there's anything wrong with some guidelines, but we want people coming into our village and feeling like they can use the house that they bought as an investment and utilize it the way that they want to. I don't think we want to have a situation where the hang up or sticky wicket is you have a 20 by 20 garage versus a 24 by 24 garage. Anybody that's lived in a house long enough knows there's not a huge difference between 400 square feet versus 450 square feet.
Certainly, and I think that when John and I talked about it, it was not like a hard rule. It would just be general guidelines. But yeah, you're certainly right. Yeah, if you have a larger vehicle, it takes up even more of that larger garage or something like that. So it is a case by case thing. We feel that the 20 by 20 is a good guideline. And if we were to codify it, there's way you could write in, you can make it not a hard rule. You could say 20 by 20 unless circumstances differ. You could write it in a way that it wouldn't cut you off immediately if you were above it. Or we could keep it we could not include it in the ordinance and just keep it as a village, as a policy, not a law.
So it would be incumbent on the petitioner to demonstrate to us that there's a hardship. So it's very much our business what they have. And because it is a hardship if you have, and I think, could we agree that it's reasonable that a homeowner should have a place to store equipment that they use, reasonable equipment? I mean, if they have four snowmobiles, maybe we'll draw the line somewhere and just say, well, you're on your own to figure that one out. But a homeowner that has, the rider mower and the snow blower, is it reasonable that they should have a place to store it?
Yeah, and I'll say, from all the cases we've had so far, it's always been, I use this for my lawnmower, I use this for different gardening equipment. It's not, purely entertainment stuff. It's stuff to maintain the property. It's
right.
Stuff like that. Or, I think you bring up a good point.
Well, as opposed to somebody that just goes to, flea market shopping every month and, comes home with stuff and has to have a place for it. That's different than, I think that's what we're talking about here. That's what we want to have some consensus on, is that what's reasonable for a homeowner to have a storage area for.
And just to kind of speak to what Andy just said about the petitioners that we've seen thus far that have said they needed this extra shed to store their lawn equipment, for example. And several of them haven't said they need the space. Several of them have said they didn't want to store it in their attached garage. So let's just keep that in mind. So choosing to not want to store it in the space that you have is different than needing to store it somewhere because you don't have the space.
I would agree with that.
And the petitioners we've heard from so far, with the exception of one, actually have a 1-car garage.
Yes.
Right? Not a 2-car garage, which presumably is even smaller than 20 by 20.
Right.
I think we had one too that had a 3rd-car garage, a tandem. But that was in the November meeting.
The last one that we talked with, who had they were the ones with the 2-story house, and that house overall was much larger, but it also had a full size, certainly standard, possibly larger than standard 2-car garage. So that was the one, I believe, where we said the shed was there when you moved in. I think there was one in the Bartlett homes that had you don't need it. So when it goes away, it just goes away because you don't need it. And that, I think that was the position we took with that one. Everyone else was coming to us saying, I only have a 1-car garage. And so
there was one in the Bartlett homes that had a 3-car garage. It was a back-to-back, and we can go back and look at it. And I think we all missed it.
The one was a tandem?
Meeting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was the last one, and we did put conditions on that approval.
Yeah, that shed could not be replaced if something happened to it, because there clearly was not a hardship in that situation in terms of needing space for storage. What does the building code indicate? I guess maybe we should know this, or we could have looked it up, but what is the standard in the building code for the village for the dimensions of a garage? There's obviously, if someone is going to come in and build a new home and it has an attached garage, there's some minimum dimension for that garage, right? To be considered safe to put a car in.
I'm pretty sure it's bigger than 20. Like, I don't remember, because I know we went through this when we built, but I'm pretty sure it's bigger than 20 by 20 for a 2-car.
Whereas my home has a small substandard garage, where if we had a minivan, we could only put the 1 car in it. Like, we would never fit a minivan and another car in it because it's small. It's probably closer to that 20 by 20, or it's certainly the 20-foot width. which is limiting for even the size of vehicles that you can put into the garage. But the reality, of course, in a lot of places is that if you have a 2-car garage, you make a decision that you're only going to be able to fit 1 car in there because you've got other stuff. And the other car sits out on the driveway. Whether it's convenience or it's because you have a riding mower and that takes up one of the spots. It's kind of an accepted condition of life and most, LaGrange, Western Springs, everyone around us, that you might have a 2-car garage and it might have a lot of stuff in it. And so you can't fit 2 cars in it.
Right, but
So that's the
we
way
don't have to deal with everybody's supporting issues.
So,
But-
Andy, just out of curiosity, like what was some of the feedback that was presented during the board meeting when this discussion happened? I apologize, I didn't listen to that call, but.
No, so, and I know, Trustee X here too, but, and Trustee Mayor, but, so there was not it was not a deep discussion, because at the time, there was, they discussed 6557 Howard, which was the home last time that we talked at length about. There was a little bit of discussion, but the overall conclusion is really just to send it to staff for further investigation, and then to have the commission weigh in. So they have not gone in depth on it. They'll be doing that next.
Okay.
Is there anybody that thinks this this guideline or original starting base for definition of hardship is unreasonable? Does anybody think it's not reasonable to talk about the extra 400 square feet being a factor? Do we think?
I think it's a reasonable way to define it. To draw a distinction between some of the maybe the older sort of substandard garages versus the garages that newer homes in the village have that are likely 24 by 24.
Yeah.
Just as a guideline, just to be clear that, if you have a 24 by 24 foot garage, you have a higher bar to get over to convince us that you really have a need for an accessory structure to put stuff in.
Would you say that if somebody comes in and they have a 24 by 24 garage, but then they say, we've got this, and this doesn't fit, and all these things are reasonable. Is that our consideration? What do they have to put in there? Is that a consideration?
I think it's important to hear everybody's individual story.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly I think having some parameters, even a very kind of basic one like this, is useful for discussion purposes.
Yeah.
For sure, because like we paid for lawn service, and the reason was because we couldn't fit a lawnmower in our garage with a snowblower. So there's always those things that we have to take into account. It's like, am I going to pay for lawn service because
You're cutting out there, Justin, I think.
So we can't just. Oh, sorry. Yeah, let me cut off the Wi-Fi. I think I'm on that. But the reason we have the lawn service is we can't fit a lawnmower in the garage with a snowblower. So
yeah,
there's all those kind of issues that people could have.
Yeah. So
if I can just reiterate that again, we're getting into like square footage of people's spaces in their homes that they pay for within our village. And I can appreciate guidelines to a certain extent, but I'm really weary of anything that tries to kind of like codify how somebody can use their space. Because I just think that, everybody's house is different and everybody's needs are different. And, you could have somebody with a huge yard that doesn't have the capability to mow their lawn. And you've got people that have a huge yard that can mow their lawn, but you're not accounting for any other variables such as car size or other things that are going on in their home. And I just think we need to acknowledge that and not.
So now you're there now.
Sorry, just acknowledge that. And I think that putting something in stone is just something that I don't think I would really ultimately feel very comfortable with.
Trustee Aaron, that's all.
Yeah, I like what Noreen, what you were saying about being flexible. We've talked about lawn furniture. We've talked about snow blowers. What happens if somebody has a workbench in their garage too? So all of these are things that the board might want to consider when you're looking at is there a hardship? I like the idea of a little flexibility myself.
I mean, ultimately, people should enjoy their homes, and as long as it's within reason. And anyway, yeah, and we'll have a discussion on every single one of them anyway. So that's how that's going to go. So I guess two issues. So am I hearing that everybody is in agreement it's okay? Or, I mean, as a bare minimum, these are the things we want to talk about as we approve variances and special uses. Are we in agreement on that one? That all these things are factors that are worth the.
Yes, but not law, right, or regulation, or.
Well, you know, these are just guidelines. So guidelines are never rigid. They're just because we would just and look at all these things in totality. You know, if there was just one thing, maybe that's not enough to approve the variance. But, you know, if there's, we just want to talk about what's reasonable to discuss and what's reasonable to consider. Not we can discuss anything, but what's reasonable to consider when we define, does this meet our criteria for hardship to approve a variance or a special use? And I think, you know, I remember discussions like this when we were approving decks, because we had to, especially for Ashbrook, we had to amend the PUD to put on a deck because they didn't have decks. And our discussion was, you know, this day and age, everybody has a deck. This is what modern living is. And maybe that's what we're talking about now too. You know, modern living is to have two cars and to have stuff, I guess. And again, I don't think we should make any adjustments for people that, you know, are collectors and have lots of big stuff and need a whole shed just to store junk. But you know, what's reasonable living is a discussion that we'll be having, I think. You know, I kind of like the work that you did there, Andy. I think that it's very logical. It sets out some parameters and it has a lot of flexibility.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, our goal really was to try to have some kind of idea of what is hardship, but also not to make it so concrete that, you know, that it's a case-by-case basis on each one. So that was our goal with it.
Yeah. And just like we do for everything else, like, is there an alternative? You know, you want to put your lawn furniture. Well, can you cover your lawn furniture and keep it out? Or, you know, we can discuss alternatives if they're, and just decide if it's reasonable or not. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is helpful for homeowners to give them this kind of, you know, when they first come in and talk to Andy before they ever see us, to kind of give them this kind of guidance about what some of the considerations are. You know, and also the heads up about, you know, if you do want to proceed with this, you know, these are the kinds of things you're going to need to be able to answer, and, you know, be prepared to come with a, you know, a high quality, attractive shed, and have a proposed location for it where you can't see it from the street, you know, like make it easy, understand what the considerations are, and come prepared, you know, and we'll be reasonable in the discussion, but the consideration really is just, you know, they need to be good neighbors, but the expectation in this community is, you know, the codes are there so that everybody's being a good neighbor. You know, you do your part, and presumably your neighbors on either side of you and behind you are also doing their part, and, and everybody benefits in the long run from that.
And Andy, staff does that as a rule, do they not? When people come in and they're asking for the moon, you're going to say, well, you're probably going to have trouble with this one, right?
Absolutely. And, and that's, I mean, from staff's point of view on this whole discussion and stuff, we're learning too, as we're going, especially myself, I can speak for myself, going through the process. And when they come, we do tell them kind of what to look out for and what will probably be brought up. But I think this discussion and then ultimately the discussion at the board will be even more helpful in that we can give residents even more or even clearer information on what's going to be expected. So I think this was a good thing to have. It's unfortunate that we had to postpone the cases that were going to come up tonight because I know they've been waiting a long time and we want to get going and there's still a lot to do, but I think it was good to have the discussion.
So much better, because if we were denying them now and then later change our mind and say, like, yeah, come to think of it, you got a point, and then we, denied earlier petitioners. No, this is so much better to have this discussion and to try to get something we can live with in the long run and that's fair for everybody. Yeah. Well, we're going to have minutes to this meeting, so we'll be able to look back and kind of remember some of this discussion. So a lot of this law evolves just how we're doing it. We have a meeting, we have discussions on it, it's in the record, and that's what we try for as precedent and try to be consistent. For now, is that enough, do you think, commissioners, to leave it at that, or we'll just refer back to this discussion and let this evolve?
I think it's a good plan.
I guess that's our recommendation, is that we think the staff's recommendation are very reasonable. We like them. And we will also ask the petitioner to demonstrate that there's a hardship, and we'll take into consideration exactly what they have. If they don't have any lawn equipment or anything else, then they need to demonstrate to us that they need the additional use, and it has to be reasonable. Okay. Other comments?
As a point of clarification, Andy, you might be able to answer this, but in our codes, probably in another section, not in the building code, are there provisions that prohibit someone from just parking their riding mower next to their garage and throwing a tarp over it? I mean, does that violate another area of the village code? Because one thing we don't want to be encouraging is for people to just pile their junk up outside.
I gotta look. I gotta look. There's I wouldn't count as a commercial vehicle, obviously, but there are codes related to like trailers, stuff like that you have to have it shielded. I don't know about lawnmowers though. I'd have to look that up.
Yeah, I mean, it can be double-edged to say, well, we don't want people to have sheds, but we also don't want people just piling stuff up outside their garage because they can't fit it in the garage. There's a balancing act there of being a good neighbor.
And like, I know that you can't park your car out next to your garage. I know that there's a prohibition against that. It's got to be in the driveway or in the. So I think there definitely are parameters on that kind of thing.
Yeah, you can't park your car in the grass in the front yard.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, this will be fun because the hard ones are coming up now. We did the easy ones. So we'll see where.
So wait, Andy, sorry, you can't park your car in your yard on grass? Is that what you just said?
No, you cannot.
What if it's on gravel? I'm just curious.
Gravel is fine, but if it's on the grass, no.
The grass. Okay.
That's in the code.
But it can't be parked in the right of way overnight.
No.
I know what you're thinking about, Danielle.
Interesting.
Gravel in your own yard is different than gravel in the public driveway, I think.
Gravel my whole yard.
Yeah, loophole.
No, nope, I'm good.
Okay, if we have no further discussion, does somebody want to make a motion to adjourn our meeting?
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, Danielle moves. Any second?
I'll second.
And Diane seconds. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, motion carries, meeting adjourned, and see you all next month.
Have a safe
Thank
rest of
you.
your
Take
January.
care.